Hi, team. So now we're going to take a look at interval notation. You've probably seen it before, but just in case, that interval notation is used to represent an interval of numbers. In other words, numbers we cannot list. So it's often used with inequalities, the less than, the greater than, the less than or equal to, or the greater than or equal to, when we have a lot of numbers that will satisfy those particular inequalities. So one of the things is to think of a simple inequality like x is less than 3. And again, let me remind you guys again of the inequalities. You may remember the alligator mouth, but I like kind of writing it sideways like this. Okay, that way it doesn't matter which way it's showing. The larger end, which is here, points towards the larger number, and the smaller end here points towards the smaller number. Okay, so in this first example here, x is smaller than 3. So if we were to graph that on a number line, and say, here's the 3, we want to know where are all of the numbers that is smaller than 3. Well, if you remember way back to when you first learned inequalities, you probably did what we'd call an open circle at 3, meaning we're going to stop all of our solutions up to 3, but we're not going to include 3. Okay, so in other words, 3 is not included in our solution, but all of the numbers that are smaller than 3 lie to the left. Okay, so notice all of those numbers from negative 10,000 all the way up to 2.9999999. All of those numbers would work and they're smaller than 3, but we cannot list all of them. So what the interval notation does is it uses the endpoints of that interval. So notice it goes all the way out to negative infinity to the left. So we would say the solution goes from negative infinity to 3. So a couple of things. If you are using an open circle, and that open circle is for less than or greater than particularly, then that's when we use a parenthesis. And negative and positive infinity always uses parenthesis because it's not an actual endpoint. It's not a number. It just gives us a direction. You might want to add that up here, often used with inequalities, uses endpoints of an interval. So now let's take a look at another example. Suppose we had x is greater than or equal to -1. So if we did that on a number line and we colored in, let's see, -1, because it's or equals to, that means -1 would satisfy that inequality. So we would color in that -1. And x is on the larger end of the inequality. So any number larger than -1 also works. So it goes all the way out towards positive infinity. So in this case, if that -1 is included, then our interval goes from -1, notice we're using a bracket, all the way out to positive infinity. Remember, infinities never use the bracket, only the parentheses. So we can add that. When we have a closed circle, which is when we do the or equals to, that means we're going to use brackets. And another thing to write is that we always write our endpoints left to right. Now, we may have a third type of example, and that could be that x is in between two values. Let's say we're going from -2 less than x less than or equal to 5. So if we were to draw that on a number line, -2 is on the left, +5 is to the right of that on the number line. You can even put in 0 there if that helps you to kind of see who's where. Now notice between the -2 and the x, it's just less than, so we would have an open circle here. But between the x and the 5, it's less than or equals to, then it would be colored in, and that x is between the two. So any value in between that -2 and 5 would work. So again, our interval notation, the -2 is not included. We use a parenthesis. The 5 is included. We use a bracket. Now, occasionally we can have more than one interval that works. For example, we may have x is less than -2 or x is greater than or equal to, I don't know, 3. So either one of those intervals will work, either the left one or the right one. So again, we want to be sure that we satisfy both of these. So less than -2, the -2 is not included, and x is smaller than that guy. So we're going to shade into the left. X is greater than or equal to 3, so 3 can be included, and x has to be larger. So we're going to go this way. So we're going to list both of those shaded areas in order. The first one on the left, always left to right, just like you read an English sentence, left to right. We go from -infinity to -2, and we're going to represent that gap or that or with a union symbol, meaning it can be the guy on the left or the guy on the right. And we're going to go greater than or equal to 3 all the way towards infinity. So as you read your interval notation, all of those numbers should be in the same order that they would be on a number line. That's where a lot of people miss points, or if it's an online class, the coding doesn't recognize that. So we have to have them in the correct order. Okay. So that's just a kind of a quick review of interval notation. Hopefully that helps you guys, and I'll see you soon.